Hey, here back in the garage with TheEZGZ. Welcome back, everybody. Now what's going on? I thought we were putting that darn engine back in. This is going to be one of those screwy videos. I have taken some sample stuff all along this week as I tore this engine apart. And I apologize for so many times over the last years referring to these bigger engines as 2275s. They are 2276. I don't know why 75 rolls off my tongue so easy, but I was just about to put it back in the car. I had the two upper bolts in place, and I crawled underneath it, and I looked up at those rusty pushrod tubes. These rusty pushrod tubes, and I saw this one in particular that was all dented up right on the end, and I thought, geez, this is not really acceptable. And as I'm looking closer with better light, because I wasn't in the position before, even though I went to the car wash, and look at all that silicone that was on here, and these are the right kind of seals to use. But you don't need to put anything on them. What you need to do is put motor oil on them. Put a little bit of motor oil on them after you've got them stretched over the tube, and they will slide into place. Another thing I'm having problems with is my aim with the camera. I get to looking what I'm doing, and with the handy cam I used to have, it was easier for me to focus, and I keep getting just a little bit off subject. What I'm actually talking about is just in the edge of the picture. So we're going to keep going here. What else? I'm still going to take this off because I think this was leaking. Having that oil breather right above the fan, that was creating leaks. The tops of these cylinders, even though I did clean them up a little bit, I got them a lot cleaner. Spent a lot of time on those. And the heads, there were so many little holes here. Look how small these holes are. Let me see if this works this way. Yeah, see all the little holes where the light's shining through? Anyhow, they're real small. Most of them were clogged with dirt, so this thing was overheating. That's why the oil leaks developed. A lot of times your oil leaks will develop from an overheated, dirty engine. Okay, what we're going to look at here is a decent little engine. This is was a brand new case when somebody started it, and this has got standard bearings in it. The bearings look great. Here's the inside of this one. It's barely got a little bit of a, there's nothing nasty in there. And I'm gonna plastic gauge this center one, put the case halves back together, torque it down, and see where I'm at as far as clearance. The crank looks great. This is the rear bearing that usually causes the need for line boring your case. And what you want to look for is back-to-back play, and there just isn't any. This thing, the thrust has not gone away. This thing has not beat itself out. When you get down to the raw case, you can see the bearing imprint, but you can't feel it. It's so slight. When it gets bad enough where you can catch your fingernail on it, or then you got to do something. That's another indication that you need a line bore. Now here's the thing too. We were talking about oil leaks, and here's the cam bearing studs that had the nuts on it that weren't tightened. They were just finger tight, so somebody must have just walked away from it, got interrupted for one thing or another, forgot where they were at. Now, each one of the head bolts, you don't need to normally put silicone underneath the nuts or flat washers on the main studs, because you've got these large O-rings that go here. But you'll note that they're missing on the center one here, and there's a reason for that. Is somebody, of course this is a modified case for the stroker clearance, but you can see where they put these big, this is what they call shuffle pinning the case. You machine this out, put these metal sleeves in there, and then you have the factory Where are they? There's two of them. Must be on the other side here. Yeah, here we go. You got a little pin here, and you've got a pin on this side, and then of course you've got the big shuffle pins in the center of the engine, and that's probably one of the reasons why this thing stayed together so nice and didn't get all distorted and stuff. I don't think this thing has a lot of hours on it, to be perfectly honest with you. Somebody's going to ask me what cam this is before I forget. It's an Engel 120. 110 is probably the most popular cam on the planet, and for good reason. It's a great little cam. And this has got almost the same numbers. You can look them up for yourself. This thing just idled down and pulled real nice with the dual throat carburetors. I'm very happy about that. Now let's take a look at the crankshaft. This is I've done quite a few stroker engines. I've never used the Volkswagen steel rods. These are the stroker Volkswagen rods. You can see they still have the little line right here, and what they do is they grind down and then they rebalance. You can see where they even got the God, I hope I was holding that right. I get to looking at what I'm talking about. Now this is nice. This is a nice chamfer, and they added this line going all the way around the bearing. That takes extra time and extra cost. You'll note here that this looks like a full-size crankshaft. A lot of times when you order a modified stroker camshaft, they will make the centers smaller here, so you have clearance as the connecting rod comes around. But they didn't do anything here, and this is just the end plays right. Whoever did the original build was doing a great job, but they got distracted, I think, and probably forgot to tighten those. And these two are usually the first two that you want to tighten down. Or maybe he got called away and said to one of his coworkers, "Hey, you want to finish torquing down that case? I got to take this call." You know, there's always interruptions. I got to go up front and talk to somebody. There's always, and these are the problems that you have. And I want to encourage people to not be intimidated about cracking this case. And that's why I'm looking at probably reusing these bearings, is because this is no big deal. If you're a drag racer, I mean an all-out drag racer, and got something built to the max, gosh, every few races you're going to be pulling it down and replacing the connecting rod bearings, or one thing or another. There's just always something when you know. This had 11-to-1 compression, and right now it's set at 9-to-1 compression. It was 49 cc's in the head, and he added these spacers. Now the previous owner told me that he got different pistons because this thing had lost power, and he put these 90,000th shims under the barrels, which was a good thing, but he didn't consider the push rods, and the rocker arm geometry was off. So what I did was, where did I put that? Oh, I put these shims underneath the rocker shaft. These are 60,000th shims, and I put in the stock push rods, which were longer, and I got it right on the money, and it works good, and it's quieter. These have the too much side play. Side play on these solid rocker shafts. You want to work towards no less than 5 thousandths clearance between these, and it's going to be difficult if the springs and everything are on the head, because when you bolt these things down, the spring tension is going to make it difficult. If it's on the engine, if you do it like this, doesn't matter where the springs are there, because these can flop around and you can feel it and customize it to that particular head. Speaking of heads, these are aftermarket heads. These are the 94s, cut for the 94s. They're 40 intakes, 35 exhaust. The stock engine is 35 intake and 32 exhaust for 1600. You can see where when they cut it out for the 94, they they have to go into the side here. And I've seen them where you can see daylight even on the sides. But these are thicker aftermarket heads, and they're made for this. This is just right for this engine and that camshaft and this compression ratio. This will be just fine indeed. So I will turn you back on as we move through this. Oh, the pistons are Mahle pistons, Mahle, however you want to say it, and you can tell that because it says so right there. Can you see that? I can't see it in the camera viewfinder, but right down there it tells you that they're the Mahle pistons. So these are forged pistons and will take a little bit more abuse than the AA pistons, which are the hyper-eutectic style. They're very extremely hard. They're great pistons. I use them in most of my motors. These cost about twice as much, so that's a good thing. And I always mark them. I put a little magic marker on them, you know, which cylinder came from which. Don't mix up your pistons. Don't mix up things, and kind of lay them out. Got my new push rods here ready to go, and I got a lot of cleaning to do today. I would like to have this thing mostly assembled by the end of today, so I got to quit messing around with this camera. This takes up more time than you realize, unless you're somebody that makes videos, good quality videos, and you know how much it can eat up the time here. So we better hit it. I think I already mentioned the fact too. I'll point it out again. This had a stock oil filter, plus it had the remote oil filter, and this silicone that you see here came from inside the engine. I don't think it was in there too long, but it was in there flopping around. Had this screen not been in there, that would have probably got into the oil pump and created a problem, and if it had gotten ground up, it could block a passage further in the engine and starve something from getting oil, and then, you know, it's that's the end of the game there. So in a way, it's a good thing. A lot of builders will put these in. If you buy a stroker motor already assembled, they will put this in for that very purpose, because after those first few heat cycles and things, you should break in your engine anyhow. You shouldn't just, you know, wang it up there full throttle. A lot of us guys say we break them in hard, but still you're not thrashing it for long periods of time. So you need to take this out, because these bigger engines, this has a 30 millimeter oil pump on it. These engines rev so quick, and everything's happening. There's more force, they rev quicker, and the stock screen was not designed to allow enough oil to get in there, and you get foam and bubbles. Your oil light might not come on. You might not see it on your oil pressure gauge, but you're not getting a good solid constant stream of good oil through there. So keep that in mind. So ideally you want a full flow system, and even if you had a full flow system, you would probably want to run that stock screen. Most people do that for their warranty. They build the engines and put those in there, and then you do what you want with it later on. But those first few runs, you want to leave that in there. And this video is getting way too long. Here's the oil pump. It looks fantastic. They use the Teflon buttons on the pistons. I even prefer those. There's going to be, on these large motors, there's going to be a lot of flexing and different, you know, movement going on because of the stress if you drive them to the max. I don't plan on it. I just like the low end torque. Oh, look at that. I never noticed that. It has a VW on it. But it doesn't look like a welded counterweighted crank. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Well, then how would they get the 82 stroke? Now there's a puzzle for you. That takes a lot of time to build up a journal going from 69 to 82. Of course, now you know that you're only going half the distance. Did you know that? If you have a lot of people are under the misconception that if you have a 69 millimeter crank, that you're going from 69 to 82 all on one side. No, it's only half of that because it's this. You see how it works? The journal's back here, so it's at the bottom, and then as it comes to this this way, this is at the end. So you double it. What's the difference? 12, 13. So half of 13 be 6.5. Only 6.5 millimeters, and a millimeter is approximately 40 thousandths. So when you get an 82 stroke crank, that's interesting. That's fantastic if it is, because it's forged and it's good steel. It does look like it's why would they have it on this side? I don't know. It's part of the puzzle. I don't know. I didn't build it. Don't care. I will put it back together. It will run fantastic for a long period of time because it's going to have TheEZGZ fingerprints all over the inside of it. You know how I am. I got to fondle everything I owned. All right, I'll turn you back on. Mild port and polish job on the intakes. The rocker arm geometry was wrong. You can see I got the new push rod tubes in there, all nice and neat and straight and with brand new seals on them, and this is all stuff that I had. In addition to adding the heavier flywheel on the back, I've got a sand sealed 6-pound pulley that I'm going to run on this side. For initial startup and run, it had a 30 millimeter oil pump in. I never did check the oil pressure on it. The light always went off right away. I got this one from CB Performance, and it's a 26 millimeter oil pump with a keyed gear on it, which is a real good thing. So we're going to see, we're going to do some experiments with that. That'll come up later in other videos. And it's a nice looking engine, and I don't think it has that many hours on it. I don't know how it got into the state that it did, or how it changed hands, or who built it, but the internals of that engine was great, and I think that'll show up in the videos that I made of the inside of the engine. It has a counterweighted welded Volkswagen crank. I never have any experience with those. All the engines that I've built for myself, I've ordered the brand new chrome moly counterweighted cranks, one piece, and new cases and new pistons and new all that sort of stuff. The pistons, the guy told me that he had replaced the pistons and cylinders, and indeed it said moly on the bottom of the pistons, so that's a good thing. Those are the higher dollar ones, forged. And it does indeed have 9-to-1 compression. I had a 120 thousandths deck height, 49 cc's on my cylinder, which is kind of low. They may have cleaned up those heads at some point. He told me that they were shooting for, well, actually they had 11-to-1 compression, which is like race fuel stuff at sea level, and this guy didn't want to do that, so he added a 90 thousandths shim. Basically, I haven't changed anything. I took this engine apart. I plastic gauged the mains. They all look good, and I'm putting it back together, and I'm going to run it. I have less than 5 miles of personal run time on this thing, and I'm just trying to avoid the oil leaks. I may go with an electric fuel pump. I have those on my other cars. Consistency. Although this engine is not going to be rotated from vehicle to vehicle because it doesn't have the doghouse cooler, which I'd even thought about changing that too. I've got my weed eater rack here. Sorry about that. But you can see just by its location, I'm surprised that turned upside down. You know, being a bachelor, you got to do everything. You got to grocery shop, cook, clean, do laundry. I get behind just like everybody else does. It's not always fun. You just have to pick your priorities. So, as you can see, that oil cooler up there, he's got a fan on it. And it looks to me like a lot of the air is blocked. And having that cooler at an angle like that, you're only going to be using bottom portion of the cooler unless that fan does come on. I just as soon move it down, shorten the hoses, get a little bit lower and more 90 degrees against the air that's coming between the seats there, and run it that way without a fan. That's how I did in my other buggy. And it had a dry sump system and then went directly through the cooler all the time, so it actually ran too cold. And looks like the previous guy had it hot. That's probably why he added the fan. So gonna make some changes with that stuff too. Thought about short back in the buggy, even cut some of all this extra excess crap off here. I just don't like dealing with it, and the kind of riding I plan doing with it, I don't need it. So yeah, but for now the idea was to not spend any money, use stuff that I had. I had those push rod tubes, and I haven't had, you could go down this far without, other than the push rod tubes and seals, and reseal everything and put it back together. I mean, a lot of people just, that's what they need. You know, they have these leaky engines, and give you a chance to see what's inside there. You could run some dingle ball hone job and put some new rings on there if you needed to. This, I did manage to check the compression. Well, I did have it in cold. I had exactly 135 pounds per cylinder on all 4 cylinders. So let's take a look at some stuff that's inside. And it's just, I don't know, I kept noticing things. You know, I noticed all that problems with the push rod tubes, and as I was trying to cut down some of the slop in these solid rocker shafts, and as I was looking at it, this caught my eye. See on the about 3 o'clock there, that little crack? Yeah, I thought, wow, that don't look good. And it goes all the way through. Hope the camera's focusing. But I caught that, and I caught a lot of little things that needed to be addressed, or they would have bit me later, probably far from home when I was having fun. So trying to get it all dealt with now. So alright, just to duplicate my endings, thanks for watching, thanks for subbing, TheEZGZ out.